Welcome to LNG, local, national, and global. Joining me today in the studios is Lawrence Rael. He's a candidate for governor. And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it took a few minutes, but we got you in here.
Well, it all worked out.
I know before we get into a lot of the issues there and stuff, let's go back a little bit. And I know you grew up in Santa Fe. You were born and raised in Santa Fe, right?
I was born in Santa Fe. I was raised in a small town just south of Santa Fe, along the banks of the Rio Grande, between the pueblos of Cochiti and Santo Domingo. So I grew up in a really rural community. My father passed away, unfortunately, when I was 3 years old, and so my mother, who is from Mexico, raised 7 children on her own, and so I grew up like a lot of kids probably from New Mexico in those days, in a pretty isolated community, not a lot of infrastructure. I tell people the story, I tell my children the story that we had a television set, but it really didn't work. It was just more like a piece of furniture because there wasn't any really stations that we could get. So, but I am a native New Mexican, and like I said, I have 3 children. I have a young boy who is a second semester freshman at UNM, a 15-year-old daughter who goes to school in Santa Fe and takes the rail runner every day. And then I have an 8-year-old who goes to school here in Albuquerque, and my wife her name is Kim, and she's from Raton, New Mexico. So we're both northern New Mexico products, and yeah, I am running for governor.
You live in Albuquerque, right? Not in Santa Fe.
I do. We live in Albuquerque, in the North Valley of Albuquerque, and have been there for almost 20 years.
You have a long career with the city as well, right? You started out with the city, I think, many years ago for Tony. No, that was the governor that you worked with. After that, I think you worked with the city.
Right. I actually worked early in my career when I was going to college. I worked in federal employment and training programs, helping young people get jobs, and I was working for a state government. Back in the day, actually, Bruce King was the governor. Okay. And then I subsequently ended up working for Governor Tony Anaya for a period of time.
What did you do for him? What did you?
At the time, I was working for the Department of Transportation. I was the acting secretary for Transportation Department for Governor Anaya. And then I went to work for Senator Bingaman in Washington, D.C., and worked in Washington, D.C. for a little over 3 years, and enjoyed that very much. Worked on many New Mexico issues, and got an opportunity to live on the East Coast in D.C. and see how Washington and all of that works up there with Congress.
What was that like in Washington?
Well,
different
it was
culture, right?
Oh,
Altogether.
It's very different. And you get an opportunity to really engage in a lot of discussions about the influence that America has on a global scale, and see what policies actually come through the Congress, et cetera. And then you also get an opportunity to meet some fascinating people. Obviously spend some time on the Hill working with different folks. President Reagan was the president at the time. Yeah. And so, and then worked with a lot of New Mexico folks on many New Mexico issues. One of my favorite stories is I worked on the Santa Teresa Port of Entry back in the day when I worked for Senator Bingaman, and I had the opportunity to actually present the concept of the development of the Port of Entry to then President Salinas, who was the president of Mexico.
Correct. Exactly.
And so it was one of those highlights in your career in public service in Washington. But the most important part for me in Washington, quite frankly, is that's where I met my wife. We're both New Mexicans.
And you're both from New Mexico.
We're both from New Mexico. Yeah. She's very bright in her own right. She graduated from Harvard and went to work for Senator Bingaman. And years later, I met her there, and then years later we married. And so that's where I met my wife, and that's where, and then eventually I moved to Albuquerque. I accepted a job with then Mayor Saavedra here in the city of Albuquerque, and I worked in the mayor's office for 12 years.
This was in the early 80s, right?
Actually, it was in 1990 when I came in to work at City Hall for Mayor Saavedra, and worked for Mayor Saavedra, and then worked for Mayor Chavez and Mayor Baca.
So you went through 3 mayors.
So I went to 3 mayors, I did, and we did a lot of great things in the decade of the 90s that really moved Albuquerque forward. Some of the projects that are close and dear to my heart, we brought baseball back when the Dukes were bought by a company or a team out of Portland. They left Albuquerque, and we couldn't lose our AAA baseball. And so we worked hard to get a new baseball team, and it was a lot of work. But fortunately, we were able to get not only a baseball team, but the citizens approved building a new stadium. And now we have a great baseball stadium, the Isotopes Park, that folks can enjoy and children can spend some time. But we also built a lot of other things during that decade. We built the aquarium and the biopark, which is a really nice quality of life project. expanded
It's
the
pretty
zoo.
nice, yeah. I've
Yeah.
been through there a few times. My wife goes there.
Does she?
Yeah.
Well, it's a great opportunity for children to see something different. And again, it's about adding value to the community and building and investing in ourselves. We've expanded the zoo to what it is today. And quite frankly, we have a world-class zoo in Albuquerque. For the size of the city of Albuquerque it's a beautiful zoo. But we also built the Explore Science Center.
Yeah.
We established the Balloon Fiesta Park. And where it is today is obviously the biggest international balloon fiesta in the world.
Because they started out in the early 80s too, I think.
It did, and it started out in, quite frankly, an old landfill that the city had covered up, and we bought the site and really made the site what it is today, a beautiful place to come and enjoy the balloon fiesta. But we also invested in lots of other things like transit projects, building bike trails, expanding the bus systems, building senior centers and fire stations and police substations, and quite frankly, investing in our children with after-school programs and community centers and the like. So did a lot of that work in the 90s, and we brought companies to Albuquerque, which is really important as part of this campaign. Is we were able to recruit companies like General Mills and Tempur-Pedic and many other companies.
For Albuquerque, correct?
Yes, they moved into Albuquerque, and we brought jobs to Albuquerque.
And that was my next question, coming into the economy, since you're running for governor.
Right.
This is a statewide office, so naturally
right.
you're going to be dealing with a lot of things there. As far as economic development, where do you see, not just Albuquerque, where do you see our state, say, in the out years, like maybe 10 years? Right now, we're kind of stagnant for the last few years.
Well, actually, we're falling behind.
There's a little growth there since our current governor came in. There was a little bit of growth there, but nothing significant that you can say, well, we're...
Yeah, well, and the
Where
challenge...
do you see it in the next 10 years?
Well, I see it as we are in a perfect position to grow New Mexico and the communities in New Mexico. But just to go back, we look at what's happening in the last 3.5 years, and what we've seen is that this recession was very difficult for the whole country, as you know. But states like Texas, Colorado, and Arizona are rebounding from this economic dilemma that we've suffered across the country. And New Mexico is just not rebounding in the same
Why are
fashion.
we lagging behind? Why do you think we're lagging? I know we have a lot of natural gas here. It was energy. There was a lot of money involved. I know the natural gas tanked a little bit down to $3.
Right.
So we lost some revenue there. But overall, when you look at it, what is it that about New Mexico that you feel? I mean, I know because I know you could see it because you went to Washington, D.C.
Right.
You hear things from different states' point of view. What do you think that this state lacks from as far as the economic attention that we don't get, that other states get?
Well, first and foremost, we are very dependent on the federal government. The federal government is a big and major employer in New Mexico. And it makes
So
us...
you think we need to wean off of that?
Oh, absolutely. We need to, well, we don't need to wean off of it as much as we need to diversify our economy. We are, so keep in mind, New Mexico, a large portion of New Mexico is owned by the federal government. Over 75% of our land in New Mexico is actually federal land. When you look at the federal military facilities,
Correct.
the Forest Service, our Native American communities. So we have a lot of federal investment in New Mexico. And it's helped us through the peaks and valleys of recessions in the past because the federal spending has stayed, if not flat, at least it's increased because of its presence in the state and the need for it. But what we've seen over the last decade is the federal government beginning to cut back. And as a result, we have now are in a position where we're actually losing more federal jobs and government jobs than ever before. So as a result, we need to become more and more proactive about growing our own businesses that are here.
What sort of incentive do you give the businesses? I mean, why is it that we can't attract businesses, Texas, Arizona, Colorado? Or I know Colorado is not doing so well, but then there is for some reason I feel that we lag behind here. Is it just our overall political culture? Do you think it's something else?
No, I think it's a mix of things.
Combination of things.
I think there's a combination of things. First and foremost, I think you need to have a governor who's focused on job creation and job development, because we do have to make sure that we're focused on trying to attract businesses to expand our economic base and bring new businesses into New Mexico. But we also have to look at New Mexico's assets and what New Mexico has to offer. For example, right now we invest a tremendous amount of our monies on Wall Street as a state. My perspective is that we need to bring some of that money back to New Mexico and invest it on Main Street. And by that I mean is creating some of the capital that needs to be here and leveraging it with the private sector so that our small businesses can grow and our young entrepreneurs can grow their businesses here in New Mexico. We have a tremendous amount of opportunity from the labs that we have, the 2 national labs that we have in New Mexico. We have great universities and great opportunities to expand areas like our health science center, which is
And that would
important.
be my next question, since you brought up health. We're going to take a short break
Okay.
in a few seconds here. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about healthcare and things
Absolutely.
like that. Wanted to hear what your policies, what you would be instating, and things like that when we come back. So we'll take a short break and come back. We'll
All
talk
right,
a little
sounds
bit.
good.
We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.